राधे 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 राधे
राधे राधे जय जय श्री
बोले वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की
जय,
राधा रानी की
जय,
श्रीमद् सतगुरु सरकार की
जय।
मन्नाथ श्री जगन्नाथ मद्गुरु श्री जगद्गुरु मदात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनम् देवकी परमानन्दम् कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। नमः कमलनाभाय नमः कमलमालिने नमः कमलपादाय नमस्ते कमलेक्षण यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तत्त्वमहा देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। Divine souls, let us chant the glories of His divine name for a few minutes, and thereafter I will begin with the subject. Krishna Govind Govind Gopala
Krishna Govind Govind Gopala
Krishna Govind Govind Gopala
Krishna Govind Govind Gopala
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
Oh, Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
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 Oh, Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopala
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
ओ भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली
भजो मोर मुकुट मुरली वाला
भजो मोर
मुकुट
मुरली
वाला ओ कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
ओ कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
ओ कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला
ओ भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
ओ भजो नंद लाला
भजो नंदलाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
ओ भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
ओ भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
ओ भजो गोपाला गोपाला
गोपाला गोपाला
ओ भजो गोपाला गोपाला
भजो गोपाला गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
ओ भजो नंद लाला
भजो नंदलाला
ओ भजो नंद लाला
भजो नंदलाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
भजो गोपाला
कृष्ण गोपाला
कृष्ण गोपाला
कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला कृष्ण गोविंद गोविंद गोपाला कृष्ण गोविंद बोले वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की. So continuing on with the subject of devotion, the practice of devotion. To practice preparatory devotion, sadhana bhakti, the scriptures specify some conditions to be fulfilled. There's not enough time for us to discuss or for me to elaborate on all the conditions. So let us concentrate on some of them, some of the aspects. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu states, Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhakti Ruttama. In other words, it is impossible for us to love God, as the Almighty, omniscient, omnipresent, all-knowing, all-pervading, and omnipotent, all-powerful, Lord of the innumerable universes, who can create countless universes by merely smiling and cause their dissolution by merely holding his breath. How can we love him? Therefore, to facilitate our loving him, to make it easier for us to love him, the saints and scriptures have established 5 ways of worshipping him. And they are known as 5 rasas or 5 bhavs or 5 modes of worship. The saints suggest that we should not look at God as God and ourselves to be separate from him, but to worship him, to love him by establishing one of these 5 relationships with him. And these 5 relations, rasas or bhavs or modes, are as follows. Shantras, in which one loves him as the subjects love their king. Dastiras, in which one loves him as a servant loves the master. Sakkhiras, in which one loves him as a friend. Vatsalyaras, in which one loves him as a child, as a parent loves a child. And Madhuryaras, in which one loves him as the beloved. So we have Shantaras, Dastiras, Sakkhiras, Vatsalyaras, and Madhuryaras in ascending order of the nectarian bliss and the proximity experienced by the devotee in each bhav, in each rasa. And the highest, of course, is the Madhurya bhav, in which one loves God as the beloved. Because even in the world we see that the most intimacy one establishes is always with the beloved, followed by the son, the friend, the servant, and finally the public at large. So, and another point worth mentioning is that this Madhurya bhav, the highest bhav, includes all the other 4 bhavs within it. In this mode of loving God as our beloved, we can also at any given time love him as our son, as our friend, as our master, and of course as our king. There's so much closeness in this relationship that there's almost a feeling of oneness. And this relationship we can only establish with Sri Krishna. We cannot establish this relationship with any other form of God. You see, God has descended to this earth innumerable times and in innumerable forms. Avatara hi sankhya hareh sattva nidher dvijah, as the Bhagavad states. And the Gita also states, Bahuni mevatitani janmani tavacharjuna, 4:5, Lord Krishna says to Arjun, "O Arjun, many are my lives that have passed. I know them all, but you do not. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharat abhyutthanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham." 4:9. Elsewhere, he states that whenever there's a decline in religion or righteousness, I come into being for the establishment of righteousness and for the annihilation, for the destruction of evil. And the Ramayana recognizes the same. Hari Ananta Hari Kathananta. Unlimited are his avatars, unlimited are his dissensions, and unlimited are his leelas, his katha, his stories, his pastimes. And yet, the more well-known of his dissensions have been as Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, and Gaurang Mahaprabhu, and so on. Of course, we are free to choose any one of these forms of the Supreme Personality to worship. And yet, out of all the forms of God, his form of Lord Krishna is the best and the easiest to meditate on. Why? Because as I just mentioned, that we must love God not as God, but as our master, as our friend, as our child, as our son, or as our beloved. And whichever one of these relationships we may want to establish with him, it is easiest to establish it with Shri Krishna. Why? Because it is in this dissension that we find the greatest number and the sweetest of pastimes, which forcibly attract our mind and which are so delightful to the soul. In fact, the very name Krishna means he who is all attractive. So out of the 5 relationships that we can establish with God, the highest is that of the beloved. And this relationship we can only establish with Shri Krishna. Even when Lord Ram descended on this earth in the age of Treta, he had promised those individual souls who had wished to drink the sweetest nectar of the highest form of love, that is Madhurya Bhav, Madhurya Ras, that he would reappear near the end of the age of Dwapar in order to fulfill their pious desire. You see, there were many rishis of Dandak forest, and the handmaidens of Sita ji, Agniputra, and many deserving souls who had formed the desire to love God as the beloved. Seeing the all-attractive form of Lord Ram, this desire was developed in their heart. And Lord Ram promised them that he would grant their pious desire, but not in this avatar, when he comes again in the form of Shri Krishna. And since, you see, the main purpose of Lord Ram's descension, it is said, was the establishment of religion and righteousness. Whereas the main purpose of Lord Krishna's descension, it is said to be the distribution of pure divine love, the highest form of divine love. And since it is logical, it makes sense, it should be our natural aim to attain the highest level of devotion to God. It is logical for us to pray to Shri Krishna. It should be our natural aim. We want to attain the highest level of devotion. So therefore, you understand that it is easiest for us to love Lord Krishna. And how should we love him? That is a question. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam He says that we must be constantly attached to him at all times. Nitya abhiyukt, to be constantly attached with our mind. We also have to do as Arjun was instructed to do by Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna told Arjun, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmar. Arjun, remember me at all times. But how is it possible to work in the world and remember God at all times? Because any work we perform in the world requires the conjunction of the mind and the sense organs. Without the conjunction of the mind, our sense organs, that is, our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc., are unable to perform their respective functions. This is why, if you are deeply engrossed in doing something like reading or cooking or playing or watching your favorite show on TV, you will not be able to hear someone calling out your name, even if the person even if the person calling your name may be sitting very close to you. Therefore, it seems like we can do one of the two things. We can either think of God or go about our business in the world. How can we do both? And yet Lord Krishna tells Arjun, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmar yuddhicha. Arjun, perform the work of fighting the battle and yet have the mind attached to me at all times. How is that possible? To work in the world and be constantly attached to God at all times? Well, the answer, you may be surprised to know that the answer to this question is a lot simpler than you think, than you can imagine. You see, all works performed by us fall into two categories. And we perform both these types of work every day in our life. Let me clarify these two types of work through an example. Suppose a woman is waiting for her husband to return from the army. He has been away for some time, and she's eagerly waiting for him to return. She goes through great pains to prepare a special meal for him, although she has spent immense effort and time in preparing this meal, yet she does not feel the least bit tired. Why? All she feels is the sweet delight of anticipation. She's looking forward to his arrival. And when the husband arrives home, she cannot wait for him to have dinner. She cannot wait to serve him. Now imagine her satisfaction when he tells her, he approves of her cooking and tells her that there is nothing like a good home-cooked meal. She experiences great satisfaction. Now suppose the next day, both the husband and wife go out to the movies, and the wife tells the maid to cook dinner, telling her which dishes are to be prepared and so on. Now, just like the wife, the maid also cooks dinner. But unlike the wife, she does not experience any satisfaction. Instead, she curses the husband in her mind for having created this extra work for her. Why? Because she cooks the dinner as a part of her job, as a part of her duty, and nothing else, nothing more. So you see, outwardly, both the wife and the maid perform the same work. And yet there's a big difference in both their works. The wife prepares the meal not only with the conjunction of the mind and the body, but also with the attachment of the mind to her work. And this attachment is due to her love for her husband. The maid, on the other hand, cooks dinner only with the conjunction of the body and the mind, minus the attachment of her mind to the work. So it means that we perform two types of work in the world. We can perform works in the world with the mind attached to our work or with the mind detached from it. We only require the cooperation of the mind in the performance of an action, and not necessarily its attachment to the action. This is why God tells us to perform our duty in the world, but have the mind attached to Him at all times. For example, a snake is dangerous as long as its fangs are intact. Fangs are the long, hollow teeth through which poisonous snakes inject venom into their prey. So that a snake is dangerous as long as its fangs are attached to its mouth. But once the fangs are removed, even the deadliest snake becomes like a tame creature, incapable of bringing harm to anyone. Similarly, the actions we perform in the world become a cause of bondage for us as long as our mind is attached to the fruits of our actions. If we work with a detached mind, that is without hope of gain or loss, these actions no longer remain a source of bondage for us. So, this is why, so what we have to do is to have tan kar mein, man yaar mein. In other words, the mind constantly thinking about God while performing worldly duties. Now the next question is this: how do we go about working without attachment to this work? Again, you may be surprised to know that all of us are already in the habit of working in this way. In fact, 90% of our actions are performed without the attachment of the mind to them. And this series of detached actions begin right from the time we get up in the morning. Let's say you get up at 6 o'clock every morning. You don't want to leave your nice and cozy bed, but you do anyways because your intellect reasons that if you don't, you will definitely be late. You will certainly be late for work. So you leave your bed reluctantly and start the morning rituals, like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, and so on. Note all these actions are being performed without the attachment of the mind to them. Even when you get to your workplace, you still work with a detached mind. Why? Why do I say that? Because how many people, how many office workers are really attached to those files that keep them occupied all day long? Most workers will agree that the most enjoyable part of any job is the coffee or the lunch break. Now, the point to bear in mind is that just as we are detached from most work we perform in the world, in the same way we are detached from most individuals in the world as well. The attachment of our mind is reserved for a handful of people, such as our parents, our children, husband, wife, brothers, sisters, and so on. With the rest of the world, we only act, we only behave politely. Let me give you another example. A nurse working in the maternity ward of a hospital helps bring thousands of babies into the world. And yet she does not get attached to any one of them. If the child is born healthy, she congratulates the parents. If there's a problem, she offers them her sympathy. But in both cases, she remains neutral and goes about her business as usual. Why? The reason is that she's not attached. She's performing, although she's performing her work, but she's performing her work with a detached mind. In other words, although she's using her mind in the performance of her work, and yet she's keeping it detached from the work. So this is the point. And as I mentioned, just as we keep our mind detached from most work we do in the world, we keep it detached from most individuals of the world as well. Like I said, our attachment is reserved for only a handful of people, like our immediate family members. So the saints tell us, the saints say, that if we loosen, if we sever our ties of attachment with even these few people, even with these handful of people, then there will be no difficulty for us in attaching our mind to God and thereby attaining Him. And moreover, if you really think about it, no one in the world really wants our love. Can you think of any such wife who would still love her husband if he refused to go to work? Or if he asked her to take care of all the expenses, all the finances on her own? Would she still be willing to take his word that he loves her? No. She will only believe him if he helps her in the fulfillment of her desires. So fulfillment of selfish desires is the true definition of all worldly love. If such is the definition of worldly love, then why should we love in the world? We should only perform our duty in the world and keep our mind attached to God alone, because He truly is the only worthy object of our love. He is the ultimate object of love of all living souls, all individual souls. Now here some people may raise an objection and argue that it is impossible for us to work in the world unless we love them. In other words, to do anything for anyone unless we love them. However, the truth of the matter is that we can only perform our work in the world with a mind that is neutral towards the world. We can only perform our duty properly. It is only when we are free of both love as well as hatred that we can carry out our duties properly towards others. For example, a judge can only carry out his duties effectively when he's impartial to both the parties. If he loves or hates either one of the parties, he cannot be impartial in giving out his judgment. Similarly, a doctor, a surgeon, will refuse to operate on his wife, whereas he may perform the most delicate of operations on others with the greatest ease and confidence. Why? The reason is that he's attached to his wife, but not to the other people whom he considers, whom he thinks of as his patients, and nothing more. Let's take another example. we are normally under the impression that a mother takes the best care of her child, because no one can love the child more than the mother. But let me tell you, the love of the mother often makes her blind where the welfare of the child is concerned. Why? Because her heart is easily moved if the child persistently cries for something. And therefore she will often let him play or sleep when he's supposed to be studying. In other words, she ends up spoiling the child due to her excessive love without realizing it. So, we see that since our mind is affected by both love and hatred, it fails to give out an impartial judgment, and consequently we fail to carry out our duty properly. This being the case, it makes even more sense. Doesn't it make sense for us to keep our mind detached from the world and attached to God alone? As the scriptures and saints state again and again. Our mind, they say that our mind should be like the compass, like a compass on the ship, which always points towards the north, regardless of the direction in which the ship is sailing. Similarly, our mind should always be directed towards God, regardless of the duties we may be performing in the world. We must always keep in mind that this world has been created to satisfy our physical needs, and not for us to become slaves to it. It has been created to maintain our body and mind healthy and strong so that we may practice devotion, so that we may one day succeed in fulfilling the ultimate aim of our life. So we're back to where we started. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam. We must have our mind attached to Lord Krishna at all times. And for this we will have to practice devotion. And there are very few people in the world who practice devotion truly. By devotion they understand visiting temples, churches, mosques, going on pilgrimages, counting beads on the rosary, and so on. They're unaware of the fact that all these external activities are useless for us unless we have our mind attached to God. So therefore it becomes necessary for us to understand how to practice devotion properly, how we can practice devotion. Well, the basic condition to be fulfilled, let us understand that. The first step is to meditate on some form of God, and for our purpose, as we just discussed, the form of Lord Krishna is the easiest and the best to meditate upon. So, what we have to do is to enclose the divine form of Lord Krishna into our mind and meditate on it. Simple as that. But the important thing to remember is to have him, to try to visualize him not as a statue or as a picture, as an inert object, but as a living personality. To have him stand in front of you, not as an inert object, but as a living personality. Have him in the conscious form. That is most important. And then, the scriptures tell us that think of him to be your master and yourself to be his servant. Now you may remind me that I've just explained that the highest is the relationship of the beloved. You see, all these relationships, the servant-master relationship, whether it be the friendly relationship, or the motherly relationship, or the lover-beloved relationship, all these relationships are directed towards serving Sri Krishna. Therefore, the feeling of servitude should be present in every relationship. Why? Because Jiver Suruphaye Krishnera Nityadas, as Gaurang Mahaprabhu has said, that being the eternal part and parcel of God, being the fraction of God, it is our natural nature to serve Him, to serve Shri Krishna. To please Him, to serve Him. Therefore, the aim of every relationship is only to serve Him. So, once again, just a few points. Have Him stand in front of you. Think of Him to be your master and yourself to be His servant. And then chant glories of His names like we do. Of His names, forms, qualities, pastimes, abodes, and associates in a loud voice. And again, this chanting must be equipped with meditation on His divine form. While meditating on Him, there are more sentiments. While meditating on Him, we must constantly develop the feelings of longing to see Him, hear Him, experience Him with all our senses. This, in brief, entails a practice of devotion. The philosophy I am expounding has the mind as the main matter behind Sankirtan, behind chanting, behind meditation. Because the mind alone is the doer. Maneva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. The mind is, as I explained before, is the cause of bondage as well as liberation, because the mind, the faculty of thinking, is the motivating factor behind all our activities, all our actions. And therefore it is the cause of bondage as well as liberation. Just as one cannot remain alive without breathing, in the same way, it is said that one cannot begin to practice devotion without concentrating the mind on God. So visualizing Shri Krishna, visualizing the form of God is compulsory. This is called Rup Dhyan. So in this way, our mind gradually becomes more and more concentrated. And along with having our mind attached to Him, we must also at the same time beg God for His grace, for His divine love, etc., etc. And eventually we will start experiencing ecstasy. And one other point, if we really think about it, meditating on Lord Krishna, meditating on God is the easiest kind of meditation. We can meditate on the form that pleases us the most. In the world, when we think of our parents or our loved ones, we must think of them in accordance to their actual appearance. But in the divine realm, in the spiritual realm, there are no such limitations. Why? Because God's personality is not confined to one particular form. We can change the color of His eyes, for instance, the color of His complexion, the color of His hair. We can even change His age, according to our sentiments, according to our emotions. So in this way, one day, Eventually, we will start experiencing ecstasy when we start practicing. Once we start practicing devotion, meditation in this way, with these thoughts in mind, we will definitely be one day rewarded with the endlessly beautiful divine form of Shri Krishna through the grace of God and the Guru. Attaining which we will no longer need to attain anything else. As the Vedas state, Sada Pashyanti Surayah Tad Vishnoh Paramam Padam. Once you attain divine bliss, you attain it for all eternity. Maya then can never take hold of us. We become eternally gratified, eternally satisfied. So with these words, I wish to conclude my series of talks. Thank you very much for listening. Bole Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki, Srimad Sadguru Sarkar ki, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham. If you have any questions, there will be a question and answer session tomorrow between 10 and 11, I believe. So we have the sadhana continuing on till lunchtime tomorrow, and the early morning session starts at 6 a.m. And if you have any questions, then you're welcome to address them tomorrow. Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Oh, Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham. Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham.
Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham.
Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
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 Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Jai Jai Shama, Jai Jai Sham, Jai Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham.
Oh, Jai Jai Shama, जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम
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 जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम
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 जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
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 जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
स्वामिनी श्यामा स्वामी श्याम
स्वामिनी श्यामा स्वामी श्याम
स्वामिनी श्यामा स्वामी श्याम
स्वामिनी श्यामा स्वामी श्याम
विहरत नित वृंदावन धाम
विहरत नित वृंदावन धाम
विहरत नित वृंदावन धाम
विहरत नित वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
ओ जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम
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 जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम
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 जय वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
ओ जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय 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 श्यामा जय जय श्याम। जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम। जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम। जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्यामा जय जय श्याम। जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
ओ जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
जय जय श्री वृंदावन धाम।
बोले लाडली लाल की
जय।
श्रीमद सद्गुरु सरकार की
जय।
श्री राघवेंद्र सरकार की
जय।
जय जय श्री राधे। जय जय श्री राधे। जय जय श्री राधे।